Hey guys, I know it's been a while. Honestly, there aren't too many of you guys who are watching these yet, but oh well, this is fun for me and have a good explanation as to why I dropped off the face of the earth. I was busy. Yeah, I just had a lot of things on my plate, and that's as much as I'll delve into that. I want to make this work. I want to upload once a week every Friday and just see where this goes. I'm working on my writing skills, and maybe one day it'll be seen by millions of people. Now enough about my return, let's delve right into the dark and chat with the void with all the monsters that hide within it. The Haunting of Willow House. In a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, an old Victorian house stood abandoned for years. Locals called it Willow House, named after the massive willow tree in the front yard. It was a beautiful home with grand windows and intricate woodwork, but it was shrouded in rumors of tragedy and hauntings. When my parents decided we were moving, I was less than thrilled. At 16, the idea of leaving my friends and familiar surroundings was, to say, not the most ideal. But my parents were excited about this old Victorian house they'd found. It was called Willow House, aptly named after the huge willow tree that stood guard in the front yard, its long branches swaying gently in the wind. Honestly, it was probably the coolest feature about the old house, but it was still imposing in a way I couldn't wrap my head around. The house was eerie, with its tall windows and ornate woodwork. It had 3 stories, including a dusty attic filled with forgotten relics. The outside was painted a pale blue, now faded and chipped, giving it a melancholic kind of charm. Inside, the rooms were spacious, with high ceilings and creaky wooden floors that seemed to whisper with every step you'd take. The house felt alive, almost breathing. My room was on the 2nd floor, facing the old tree. It's spacious to say the least, with its high ceiling imposing on me, and it boasted a large bay window with a seat where I could sit and read. Definitely gonna put some pillows there later, I said to myself, as I made my way through the room and placed boxes down on the cold hardwood floor that crinkled slightly. Still, having to move here wasn't my first choice. Both my parents kept saying, "Think of all the new friends you'll make." But I groaned, remembering that terrible conversation as I collapsed onto my bed and turned to look out the window. The willow tree outside was enormous, with its long branches that seemed to reach out toward the house, towards me, as if they were trying to tell me something. I liked the room, but from the moment we arrived, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The first few nights in Willow House were quiet, but after a while, I tended to wake up in the middle of the night. It kept persisting, and soon I started to hear the noises. The patter of footsteps and the occasional creak of a door, a soft rattling of something. I thought I was going crazy when I swear I thought I saw something in the corner of my eye, and the feeling of someone peeking at me around the corner, but I hadn't seen anyone. I only found nothing. My parents dismissed it as the house settling, but something was wrong. The feeling of being watched was constant, especially at night when shadows seemed to stretch and reach out like unseen hands. Eventually, about 3 months after we moved in, I woke up to find something that made my whole body lock up in fear. In the darkness of my room, only slightly illuminated by the cracks between my blinds, the moonlight spearing through and shining on someone sitting at the foot of my bed. A little girl just sitting there at the edge of it. She looked about maybe 8 years old, with long dark hair that cascaded in waves down her back and pooling around her. She wore an old-fashioned white dress, kind of like something out of those photographs where you sat for 5 minutes before the film could get a person. I couldn't see her face, which unnerved me, but I could feel something coming from her. Sadness, longing, curiosity maybe. I just knew she wanted to be seen. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, and there was a faint glow around her, as if she were lit from within. She didn't say anything, just stared at me, and then she was gone. I wasn't just scared, I was terrified. As soon as she disappeared, the fear slowly washed away, and was more confused than anything else as the night poured on. I knew she was a ghost, but she didn't seem threatening. There was a certain gentleness in her presence, a quiet curiosity. I continued to stare at the spot where she had sat not long ago for what seemed forever, until sleep took me. I didn't tell my parents the next morning. Why would I? They sure as hell wouldn't believe me and chalk it up as a bad dream or letting my mind wander too much because of the big house. It wouldn't matter though, because things just got more active as the weeks went on. The strange occurrences started happening more frequently to once a week, then almost daily. Objects would disappear and reappear in odd places. Doors would open and close by themselves, and lights would flicker inexplicably. The house felt more alive, as if it had its own heartbeat, its creaks and groans like whispers of secrets long buried. My dad would chalk it up as faulty wires, a draft or just us forgetting where we had actually placed things. My mom would agree, of course, but she seemed weary about it as things just seemed to be only getting stranger. One morning, about 2 months later, my mom found all her accounting files neatly stacked in the middle of the living room floor. She was puzzled, but shrugged it off as a prank, though I knew she was beginning to wonder. Then came the incident in the kitchen. It was early on a Saturday morning, and I'd gone down for breakfast. My mom was already in the kitchen making some waffles and bacon. She had her headphones in while she listened to one of her podcasts. As I entered, time just halted as I could feel the morning noise cut out for a second. The sizzling bacon and bubbling batter stopped popping. The birdsong seemed to be cut off. Even the TV in the back in an instant just went quiet. There she was, sitting at the kitchen table, her legs swinging gently, her head fixed on the plate of waffles my mom had just made. Her small hands were clasped together on her lap. My mom turned, and her eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment we saw her clear as day in all that quiet. Then, just as quickly, she vanished with it, and all the life returned in a crescendo. My mom was shaken. She couldn't deny what she had seen. She sat down, pale and silent, staring at the empty chair. Horror, nervousness, and doubt of one's sanity fell through her. She tried to rationalize, but how could you? We both saw her. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint singing. It was a soft, melancholy tune, and it seemed to come from the tree. I got up and looked out the window, and there, sitting on a branch just outside, was her. She was humming softly, her hair waving in the wind while parts of it tangled with the branches, not knowing where her hair ended and the tree began. I watched, entranced, until she faded away with the dawn. Encounters with her became a daily occurrence, almost as if my parents forgot to mention to me and themselves they had not one child but two, except came out when she wanted to, and however she felt. From peeping behind the corners to catching a run up the stairs to sitting on one of the branches of the willow tree. I even started to take pictures of where I thought I felt her lingering around, which the results were in fact haunting. Glowing orbs and streaks of white smeared across them like digital errors, but I knew it wasn't an error. Later, I gave them to my mom to take a look at, if she wasn't convinced before she was now finding out what was living in her house. My dad, being the way he is, though, tried to rationalize it, but at this point it was just a matter of when he'd get to personally be introduced to all of it, to her. I don't blame him for not believing outright even with all that's occurred, because to him he thinks it's either the house being old or my mom and me playing a long-winded prank that has gone way too long. Despite his skepticism, my dad had his own encounter that finally convinced him. It was late one night, and he was working on some renovation plans in his study, a room at the back of the house that had a view of the garden. He had the window open to let in some fresh air when he felt a sudden cold breeze, followed by the distinct feeling of being watched. He looked up and saw a reflection in the window, a little girl standing behind him. Startled, he turned around, but there was no one there. He checked the house, thinking it was me playing a prank, but I was asleep in my room, and my mom was in bed. Shaken, he returned to his study, but the room felt different, colder. On his desk, he found one of his sketches altered. Someone had drawn a crude picture of a little girl holding hands with two adults. It was simple, but unsettling. The next morning, he showed us the drawing. My mom and I knew it was her, and for the first time my dad didn't argue. He looked at the sketch with a troubled expression and simply nodded. It was clear he had finally started to believe. Determined to understand more about the ghost that seemed to inhabit our home, my mom researched the history of Willow House. She discovered that the house had once belonged to the Whitman family, who mysteriously disappeared one night in the early 1800s, leaving their young daughter, Danica, behind. Danica was found dead weeks later, having apparently died of neglect and starvation. The tragedy had cast a shadow over the house ever since. My mom reached out to local historians, libraries, and even tried to contact former residents, but there was little information about the family's disappearance. The townspeople had long avoided talking about the house, considering it cursed or haunted. In her research, my mom came across the name of a local medium, Martha. My mom reached out to Martha, explaining our situation and asking for her assistance. Martha was intrigued and agreed to visit Willow House to see if she could make contact with Danica. She arrived on a sunny afternoon, a small woman with kind eyes and an aura of calm. She brought with her a few tools, a pendulum, some candles, and a small bell, saying they were for focusing energy and communication. Martha began by walking through the house, attuning herself to its energy. She paused in several rooms, including the nursery on the third floor and the kitchen where we had seen Danica at the table. After a while, she sat down with us in the living room and explained what she had felt. According to Martha, Danica's spirit lingered in the house because she felt abandoned and forgotten. The energy in Willow House was heavy with sadness, a reflection of Danica's last moments. However, Martha also sensed a deep affection from Danica towards us, indicating that she saw us as her new family. Martha suggested we hold a ceremony to acknowledge Danica and offer her peace. She explained that such ceremonies could help spirits move on by providing closure and releasing them from the burdens of their past. My parents agreed that we should try to help Dancia move on. On the evening of the ceremony, we gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, but also filled with a strange anticipation. Martha lit the candle and placed it in the center of the room, asking us to sit in a circle around it. She began to speak, calling out to Danica, telling her we knew her story and that we cared for her. She explained that it was time for Danica to move on. We would help her do so. As Martha spoke, the room grew cold, and the light from the candle flickered. We all felt a presence, a gentle but poignant energy. Suddenly, Danica had reappeared, outside the house standing next to the willow tree. Her hair was flowing upwards, and could barely make the expression on her face as she stared right at us. We all held our breaths, completely frozen in anticipation. The huge tree seemed to sway as the house itself groaned and cracked. Hearing the sounds of footsteps running up the stairs and over our heads, feeling the pounding in our chests. The house was rattling almost like it wanted to fall apart until slowly, everything just went silent. After the ceremony, the house felt different, lighter, almost like it had taken a deep breath. The playful haunting ceased, and the atmosphere became serene. The willow tree no longer felt as imposing, just a reminder of what had gone on for so long. Willow House, which once felt like a place of mystery and sorrow, became a warm and inviting home. My parents continued with their renovations, restoring the house's beauty while preserving its history. We often talked about Danica, but slowly those two became just distant memories. Years later, I often visited Willow House, which my parents kept in the family. The house had lost its eerie atmosphere and was filled with warmth and love. My parents had finished it, blending its old-world charm with modern comforts. It became a gathering place for family and friends, a place filled with laughter and memories. Even as an adult, I felt a special connection to the house. There were times when I would sit by the bay window in my old room, looking out at the willow tree, and feel as if Danica was still there, watching over us. It was a comforting thought, a reminder of a little ghost girl who had once been a part of our lives. And though she had moved on, her presence, her memory remained, woven into the fabric of our family story.